Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to America First Patriot Podcast. Defending freedom and liberty is our motto. We put God first and politics second. We're excited tonight to have into the studio a very good friend of mine who is a former actor, a former congressional candidate, and an advocate for disabled veterans. And he's thinking about running again for either mayor of New York or public advocate. Let me introduce, without any further ado, the dynamic Darren Aquino. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Chauncey. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm happy to be here with you tonight and share some of our thoughts and beliefs for our great country. How you doing tonight, Chauncey?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to have you on the show. I am going to let you talk about yourself because there's a lot to unpack. So I'll let you talk about your humble beginnings and then how you got involved in politics, and we'll take it from there. Then we can talk about some issues that are going on around the country.
Okay. I sent you a picture of me holding my first child at 23 years old. It goes back to the early 80s. I was a young man.
Yes.
I grew up, by the way, I had polio and a club foot, so I was faced with a lot of challenges. And a lot of people seen the story, and you've seen the story. It was at a time that, on top of those physical conditions, I started this small business with my brother-in-law's brother who was deaf. I had a disability, he had a disability, but he was a strong kid. So we started this sauce and cheese business, and we would deliver sauce and cheese to local pizza parlors in New York and Queens. And had a car accident. So to add insult to injury, I hurt my back, and it just made things worse. And I had to file for Social Security at a young age because we didn't know. I mean, the injuries, we didn't know, you know. Needless to say, things got better. I did file, but in that process, I wasn't a political guy. I grew up in East Harlem and the Bronx, and then lived in Queens. You know, my parents were separated. And regular New York kids, you know, we grew up back in those days in the 70s. I was born in late 59, so growing up in the 70s where you're like, you know, 15, 14 years old, you know, you start to become a young man fast in New York. I don't have to tell you New York pace. That's why we have that saying, a New York minute. You know what I mean? Before you know,
that's right.
Before you know, you're 14 and you're a man, and you're a breadwinner for your household back in those days, and that was great. Mm-hmm. New York was great. So Reagan was the president. I didn't vote for him his first term because who cared about that? That was like, you know, there wasn't a generation of young folks voting or getting involved in the state of affairs of our country. But listening to Ronald Reagan and remembering him as watching the old movies, he caught my attention one day and was talking about the country and the economy. And I was home, you know, I got a baby, I got an injury, I can't do much. I herniated the discs in my neck, back injury, and I already had a little bit of scoliosis and polio and all those things. compromised me even doing menial work. So I said, okay, I got to do this. I didn't want to do that. You know, too proud, come from a background of Italian and Puerto Rican. And, you know, very proud cultures. But, you know, we're New York Americans of these descents. And,
exactly.
You know, you don't want a free ride. Welfare is out. You know, my child is not going to grow up on welfare. And so, you know, I learned about Social Security, that this was a benefit. And I applied for that, and then there were some difficulties. And I contacted President Reagan. And he really moved me that, like, this is a guy, wow. I didn't pay attention to Carter other than, you know, when the Iran situation and they were hostages, you know, we were concerned, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, New Yorkers, you know, you get involved, like, when there's a threat to America. Then, it's, you know, if you're a teenager, you're listening. You know, whenever there's harm pointed towards America, you're on alert. And I started hearing him speak, and, you know, the buck stops here, all of these good things, you know, and I'm going to deal with it, and I will help anybody, but if you put a boop it up. I said, you know, I told my wife, and I'm dyslexic, so before this is going to lead into why I became an advocate. I didn't realize the challenges until I was out in mainstream America as a young father, that there were so many things and getting limitations from school from these disabilities. Remember, being back and forth at that time, I had like 7 surgeries on my legs just to try and correct my legs and walking. Mm-hmm. But we're New York strong, New York tough. Nothing would hold me back. I was determined to be just as able-bodied as you were at that age. And you know, you had the friends in the neighborhood on the lower Midtown Manhattan. So they would be encouraging, and also bullies. You know, kids are mean. But needless to say, I dictated a letter, 15 pages, going into the whole story of my life. And it's out there in social media. It's out there. It's in the Reagan archives. And I poured out my heart and saying, wow, like, you know, I never saw this side of me. But when you're a parent, things change. You know, you're fighting to just be part of society with an opportunity, you know? And what opportunity is there for people with disabilities, limited education, from the things of nature, like dyslexia? Nobody planned it. And back then, nobody even knew what it was. When you went to, and I went to Catholic school, if you didn't get it or read or do what the nuns were telling you, you went in the corner. They would cast you to the corner as stupid. Remember that, Chauncey? You know?
Listen, I remember when these were rulers on us in Catholic school.
Yeah, listen, we went to St. John's. It was with the school that they called the Cathedral High School. It was there on 56th and 55th and First Avenue. So, needless to say, I wrote this letter, 15 pages, everything, detailing. I sent medical records. I started getting involved and communicating with the White House. Back in those days, Reagan would walk through the White House, and later I'll tell you part how I met the woman that was there, and she remembered these things going through because she was one of his young interns. And you can send a Western Union. You could do it on the phone, and they charge you like $7.50 for the first 50 words. It was like cheap, and then I think 40 cents or 50 cents each additional word. So I said, okay, I'm watching. I send a letter. I go to the post office with my wife at the time, the baby. We were living in Staten Island. And I'm looking at the postman. Yeah, I'm sending this to the White House. The president, he's going to answer me because I just heard him on TV. And, you know, I'm 23 years old. He's going to answer me. And a week goes by. I'm, like, discouraged. He comes back on television again. And he says so many things that, you know, the economy and Dan Rather, these guys were all young reporters, you know. And I said, oh, yeah. He didn't answer me. So I dictated a mailgram that would only cost me $7.50 because I was of a few words, and they weren't good ones. I was angry. And I'm saying, you know, I wrote you believing that you cared about the country. I would die for my country. Doesn't my country care about me? I really believed you. I got a couple of other things, and I got a child, and I don't want to be on welfare. I don't want to do that. I filed for Social Security. I don't want to do that. I'll mop the White House floor. There's something for me to do. There's no opportunities in America. Opportunities is possibilities. Needless to say, that went to him, and he was moved. 2 days later, I'm watching again on the news, and the president said, "Dan, what are you going to do about the economy?" It was a tough time. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was 1983. And it was like, and then he says, and he says it clear, I got a lot of mailgrams and telegrams and phone calls to make. The next morning, so a year had passed with all this going back and forth, and where the letters and came in the mailgram. And I'm ducking bill collectors, right? Everything went upside down when you can't deliver sausage and cheese. You're not getting that cash coming in, and there's no income, right? So the phone call comes. I told him, I said, I'm not here if they ask for me. Hey, the guy goes on the phone. I'd like to speak to Darren Michael Aquino. He addresses me by my full name. And she says, well, who's this? He says, I'm calling for the President of the United States. May I speak with him, please? I said, okay, give me the phone. I'll take it. I'm still young at heart, believing that anything is possible. He gets on the phone. He says, are you Darren Michael Aquino? I want you to know. First thing he says, did you send the president a 15-page letter? Because I commented in the mailgram that I sent you a letter and you didn't even answer me. And he says, well, rest assured, the president has ordered them to find it. At that moment, I started to get very emotional. I'm talking to one of the president's cabinet members. He said, I have a memo on my desk, the famous Reagan memos. I have a memo on my desk from the president that I'm to contact you personally. So he got your mailgram, and they're going to search for the letter. He wants to know what he can do to help. At that moment, I started weeping. I was lost for words. And I was like, the president, boy, I was wrong, and I just told him he don't give a damn. And he says, well, okay. He says, were you a veteran? I said, no, I wasn't a veteran. They wouldn't let me serve. But I wanted to. I said, I tried to enlist at 17. I did, no lie.
Right.
Tried to enlist at 17 years old. I wanted to be all I could be. Remember that back in the day?
That's
it. I said, look at this. I'm going to get education. This is great. I want to go into service. So
you're bringing back a lot. Darren, real quickly, you're bringing back a lot of memories. I remember when I was a freshman in college, and I did a paper on Reaganomics. So you're bringing back a lot of memories. Yeah, Ronald Reagan. I voted for Ronald Reagan actually back then, but yeah, he was a dynamic individual that cared about the country, and everybody wanted, to be pulled up by their bootstraps. And Chauncey, he did that, and the calls kept fluttering. Letters kept coming to me from the White House. I'm calling on behalf of the president has told me to communicate. Department of Education, Department of Labor, all of his cabinet members, the Veteran Affairs. Well, because he said, you said a line in there that you would die for your country. Yeah, I don't have to be a veteran to do that. I'm an American patriot. He said, exactly. He said, okay. So he said, did you file this? Tell me what you did so far. He wants to know what obstacles you were having, and he will intervene. I went, wow. Wow. So, needless to say, speeding it up because got the letter, he was moved. He assigned a woman that we were friends for more than 20 years while she worked there. I'll never forget her name. Charlene, agency liaison to the president. He said, everybody stays on this case until it's done. Okay, he's seen the obstacles because even then, Chauncey, politics was working against it. It was a moving machine for those in that circle. But if you were outside, you were at their mercy. And these are the things that inspired me, to be the advocate. God was teaching me how to be the voice. The one that you thought you couldn't, you were the train that could. And I was saying, oh, my God. It was early, too. I got saved early in those years. I found
found my place with God, right? So this is all happening. So I apply. He says, look, the woman calls me, talking to me every day from the White House. No, the president was adamant. He came in here personally to me and said, I want you to be on top of this. And she says, so I went to file welfare, and I signed a paper. Back then, if you were getting, so you were paying them back. It was like a loan. So I felt good about that. I felt good. I wasn't getting a free ride. I'm not a couch potato. I'm not a leecher or anything, So that was important, How we feel determines how we act, So needless to say, all of this was going forward. And I filed. So months are going by. Social Security deliberately lost my file, and it stayed like this for years. You see, this is where you see the early on demons that were placed in Social Security. If you reached out to a supervisor, they would lose your stuff on purpose. And they put it under AC. You might see my AQ. They put it under ACQ. How smart were they then to deceive, right? So, and for years when they gave me the Medicaid, it said ACQU because they couldn't say they mistaked it. So they live out the lie. So just take a look at that. They continue in the lie. Okay? Needless to say, it's getting months are coming. 4th of July is coming up. So because now there's White House pressure, they give it to me. So they wait a few months and they think they're going to screw me now. So I started homebound visits. I'm the first guy that started homebound visits. And the White House pushed them. Now, this White House was respectful of the separation powers. So they had a go-between. He was called the Public Affairs Commissioner. He would be in between to be the voice for the White House to help other citizens, if the president, was going that way, and to help people who would communicate with him. Reagan was that guy. So they give me the benefits. Now it's 4th of July. Thursday before the Wednesday before Friday. Friday you shut down. Everybody's leaving early. Now they stopped my benefit. The worker comes to my house. When I tell you this story, you're going to fall off the chair. The worker comes to my house. Now, clearly, I wore shorts so he could see my legs, right? Messed up. So he comes in the house, goes back to the office, closes my case, says he's not disabled. Imagine a caseworker making a medical decision. This is where I started getting the energy. Exactly wrong. Yep. But back in those days, there was no ADA law. I was one of the stories and the lobbyists to make the ADA what it is today. So, and I'll tell you how that happened. So now, closes my case. And they tell me, the guy goes, well, he closed, so I got to call the supervisor. Nobody's taking my call because they know I got White House juice. So now they're saying, we'll fix him because you got Democrats versus Republicans, right? I said, so I called Charlene Kozar. Charlene says to me, if there's a problem with any of your benefits, you call me. You understand? I said, I will. She says, here's the number, my direct line. I had this for 20 years, Chauncey. I said, well, they closed my case. She said, what? I said, the worker came and said, I'm not disabled. She says, I saw your medical. All right, she says to me. I says, it's 4th of July coming up. I have no check, no food for the baby, nothing. She says, you hold on. I'm going to make a call. She says, generally we don't do this, but you're a special case. Right? The president himself gave them a direction. So she said, I'm going to call this man. She says, write this number down. If he doesn't call you in 5 minutes, because I said nobody's answering my call, they know that you're involved and they're giving me a hard time. Now they retaliate. This is before we knew what retaliation was.
Exactly.
So, okay, this is how I became a good advocate. I was the first one to learn. God gave me a front row seat of education so I would be the best at what I do. So,
amen.
He says to me, I hang up. I says, okay. I call the guy. He don't call me. He doesn't call me. Because this guy in the state calls the guy for the city. He calls the commissioner and says, what's going on? I just got a call from the White House. So I call him back. I said, the commissioner in Staten Island's not listening to me. This is nobody. I'll be hungry. This is why, and I said, this is why people, in one of my letters, this is why people go out and steal. There is no opportunity. Needless to say, I called the guy. Phone rings. I said, hi, this is Mr. Aquino. Right away he knew. He says, you didn't get a phone call yet? I said, no, sir. He said, stay by your phone. I just had to say my name. He said, you stay by your phone. If the commissioner doesn't call you, you call me back. I put the phone, I go, 2 minutes, please. Hello, Mr. Aquino. Oh, my goodness. What a mistake. There was a little error. He said, I got your file here. He says, you didn't, in his first words, he said, you didn't have to call the White House. I said, yes, I did. I'm an American citizen. Right. You're not giving me a free ride. I signed papers to pay you back. Okay? This is a loan. This is not a gift. This is not charity. They said, well, don't get excited. Don't get excited. A man came here and made a medical judgment who's a caseworker, a paper shuffler. And he said, well, okay, well, then we weren't worried about divulging, but later I made them redact all that stuff. Needless to say, he says, well, okay, I don't want to make any promises. I says, it's Thursday. Tomorrow, he said, well, he can't make any promises to reactivate the case. I said, so leave me, tell me, what am I supposed to do? Leave my baby, starve, and what? Go out and steal? Go out with a gun and put a mask on? Is that what I'm supposed to do? So you could put another statistic? He didn't know where to put his face in, and I could feel it. The next morning, bright and early, they came with food stamp vouchers. He came with cash checks. He brought the checks. He came with a handful. The guy that closed my case came back to the door like humble pie. And then he said, you didn't have to call the president. Oh, no, this is good. Now I set up homebound, but they weren't ready for homebound. And I gave Reagan the idea of, like, how do people, in the White House, I would communicate all my thoughts. All of my thoughts, and boy, I had a lot. And all of these thoughts to say, listen, when people go to a fit, like people getting welfare pending, there were other people waiting for having welfare, waiting for Social Security. I wasn't unique, but I wasn't aware. I was in a different place and time zone. But when I said, how does a person, they closed their case because they couldn't show up because the guy had no legs and no accommodations. And this is what started to inspire me. And then I'd feel bad. The nature of us as good people, good red-blooded Americans, we get sad if we see a child abducted, a homeless person. It affects us. Emotionally, we're affected, and we take action. That's the true American spirit in all of us. Right now in this political climate, some of these core Democrats that were once patriots lost their way. And, and some rhino Republican, they lost their way. Their greed was greater than their loyalty. And that never works out. So needless to say, as this goes on, a whole bunch of stuff started happening. Good stuff. Social Security being a federal agency, they were determined to keep my file lost, that the White House was getting pissed off. It took 6 years to get the award. But the president held on. I said the judge that denied me awarded me in my hospital bed. No, don't come in. I'm getting White House pressure. She was trembling on the phone. Because before he left that high and noble office, he kept his word to me. Kept his word that went so far that made me move to be that voice for those vulnerable people that didn't know how to speak for themselves. The kid with limited education had the spirit of the living God saying, you can, you can, you can, you will. And his will be done. And there it goes. I was there. I was off and running. But here's the funny part. Okay, we'll get past now into another time as I was starting to act. I was doing extra work. Friends of mine said, Darren, you're a natural. When I first auditioned, I auditioned the line from On the Waterfront, Marlon Brando. I always played Marlon Brando's part. That was my audition. Charlie, you were my brother. You should have looked out for me. I'll never forget it. Remember when he was talking to Rod Steiger? So these iconic actors, I said, how can I be an actor? I got a bad leg. All these actors are like handsome. But I knew Paul Newman. He lived in the neighborhood. Charles During. These are folks. We grew up with these actors in our neighborhood. Catwoman, I used to deliver her groceries to her. Even Sylvester Stallone, Catwoman from Batman, Julie Newmar. I used to deliver her groceries. She lived in Sutton Place. Beekman place, and all of these things, right? These are motivations. I had a good life looking back. So I started doing this extra work. My friend from Actors Reps, I think they're still around, he sets me up. I go on this job. It's a big cattle call. I didn't know anything about the union. I was hearing from people, no, you got to get into this, you to be this, so your union, bada beep. Reagan was the founder of the Screen Actors Guild. So
right.
I'm on a job. We're doing a movie by Grand Central. Guess who I see 15 years later? The guy that closed my case. He's an extra. He said he never forgot me. He never forgot me. He's grabbing everybody. You wouldn't believe this guy, the White House, was calling us, putting pressure on us to give him a benefit. I said, look at this. Talk about karma, right? The guy that shut me down was the guy I'm sitting next to, and he like, holy crap. He's like looking at me. I said, yeah, life's a bitch, isn't it? And then he meets me and looks. I said, yeah, you were a douche back then. You closed my case. You made a medical assessment. All you were was a paper shuffler. And he says, well, people scam. But I didn't scam. So we had a brief discussion. It was over, and he was telling everybody. He was getting calls from the White House. And his file, and now, take one more piece of that, and then we'll move on to another subject, because these were the motivations early on.
Yeah, I want to do a
so
little
this one guy,
mm-hmm.
Before they started now for the case, they put a homebound guy. The guy was a veteran.
Right.
The guy was a veteran, working for the city. He says, Mr. Aquino. I said, call me Darren. He says, look, we got you down as homebound. They created this new thing because you put pressure, and we get it. He said, but if you have a car and you could roll up here down by South Street. I was in Grantwood over by all the way out in Staten Island. They were down by the ferry. So he says, I said, I have a car. He said, if you can come by, I'll meet you downstairs. All you got to do is sign the paper so it doesn't pay. I could scale it, and I don't have to do all that traveling, and we can get it done. I said, I could do that, brother. So he says, okay. When I got there to sign the paper, he said, look, I want you to see this. White House pressure. Give him whatever he wants. That was in the file. He said, you have to see this. He says, you shook some people up in Washington. You must know some pretty influential. Well, I said, the president happens to like me. And that was that. And then,
letter, which is awesome. Your 20s writing a letter to the president for him to respond.
Yes.
Is a blessing. But real quickly, for those that are tuning in, you're listening to America First Patriot podcast, and we're proud and honored to have in the studio the founder and CEO of Advocates for Disabled Veterans, police, firemen, and families of 88 vets. We're happy and proud to have you in the studio. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
for your service. Darren. The story that you're sharing with has been extremely inspiring. Of how you got involved from a young age of fighting for disabled veterans and people across the country. God bless you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
I'm
Thank
proud.
You, Chauncey.
Yeah, I'm proud to be your friend, and always blessed. You always have a spot on the podcast to come and chat with me.
Thank you.
Now, I'm excited to hear, because I remember, Darren, when you were an actor for Law and Order. So I'll let you go into your acting career now.
Oh, gosh. Well, yeah, I got very lucky. Well, not lucky. I was blessed, Those things that I did for my heart, God knows the heart of every man. He knows that it's wicked and deceitful above all. But we struggle within ourselves. And I just, I can't help but help somebody in need if they're in my pathway. It's just like a nature for me. So as I wanted to move on in the career of thinking, well, I got a shot. I'm working. I mean, this guy says I'm a natural actor. I do know some actors. So, I have some family. And these days, we had the famous Rayo's restaurant in New York City. My cousin Frankie, it was owned by my Uncle Vince, great-uncle Vince, my great-uncle. And a lot of celebrities started coming there in the 70s. So I was regular there. I was always there because it was family, my father's side of the family. So, I made some advancements. the union was under duress, and they were striking back in 2000. Big strike. They were with the AFL-CIO. They were partnering up. And back then, right, 24 years ago, none of the actors wanted to come out on the picket line. The last strike, they all came out. But that strike, nobody came out. So if you were an extra and you were a background worker and you would volunteer time to be members to picket and volunteer, they would grant you access if you put in 80 hours. I did 120 hours. I figured, let me do a little extra, help out, because I got into it. You know, it was still in the political move. I'm still advocating, and then I became a nonprofit that year. But I figured, acting at this point, not being big and famous, it's just like a part-time job. So, after I became union, I did the volunteer work, and I went on a couple of jobs while I was doing background. I went on Law and Order in the early episodes with Chris and Mariska. I was back on the street just doing pedestrian, but they always tell me, Darren, you got a look, you got a good character face. So they would place me by the principals. Look here, do this. Okay. Well, I started doing that, and some of the casting agents, they liked me. They took a liking to me. The ADA was 10 years old already at this time. So I got a spot, and, I take advantage. I talk to people, very charismatic. I get in there, and the people liked me, and then they heard about Rayo. So they said, oh, you can get us in there? I mean, maybe. Maybe I can. I could see, I wasn't arrogant or nothing like that. I said, sure, if I could help somebody, sure, why not? Chauncey comes up and says, hey, Darren, I wanted to go there. I sent veterans that tried to get to Rayos for 25 years. He said, I couldn't get on the list. Vietnam veterans. I was in a public restaurant in the Bronx, and they heard me talking about Rayos because I was on the phone with Joey. I said, listen, I got to come down there. And my wife says, who are you on the phone? I said, I'm on the phone with Joey at Rayos. The people were saying, wow, Rayos, you called them? I said, yeah. I said, so you're a veteran. I see your pen. When did you serve? Vietnam Navy? And she says, I wanted to go there so bad. I said, okay. I said, hold on. I called up. I had a night in June. This is like, I was still up in the Bronx. I said, okay. So you want to go? You four folks, and they live in Florida. We're just up visiting. I said, all right. Here you go. Boom. You're done. You're in. Here you go. They called me. They sent me pictures to the phone. Thank you so much. I said, no, thank you for your service. I appreciate you. This is my way of showing you that what's mine is yours. We're all in this fight together. And that was
Amen.
it. I said,
right.
No big deal. No big deal. So that was the start. And then as I was going on the show, they sent me, I needed to get a cop uniform. Not a problem. I got relatives. I was getting pieces. Who could afford it? We're struggling still, Right. So I got to put this uniform together. I got in. I had that look. You saw the pictures with me and Mariska in the uniform. I looked like the real deal. And I was likable. Yeah. I was likable. They were online too. I was likable. I got personal pictures with me and Chris after 9/11. We stopped the show. They picked me for an episode, but because it was too close to the storyline of what happened, they canceled, but they casted me. And then they scratched it, because they didn't want to put it up. But everything, and then I started working. They made me a regular, just like that. And they said, okay, call him back. And then there was this guy, Roger. Good guy, brother, man. He was, really cool. I sent him to Rayo with his wife. And, I worked 3 years. I was on the show. I met Ted Kotchoff, Dick Wolf. And in my first year, I got brazen after I was on the show for a season. I said, there are some disabled actors that don't get called, and you're doing these scenes. That's why on the poster, there's the slate of the movie, a slate, everybody knows what that is, and you see me carrying the wheelchair with the crew. We accommodated the actors, and Dick Wolf loved it. He says, hey, we'll do that. We don't choose an individual. We ask for bodies, and we tell them what the scene is. It would be discriminating. I said, but now, knowing that, he says, we'll do it. That's a no-brainer. Darren, that's wonderful. And my friend Peter Lito, he was an executive producer. He's on another show now. He says, The squeaky wheel gets the oil. Good for you, Darren. So what did I do? I transported 4 disabled people, picked them up at their home. They got wavered, and I took them there. Didn't work on the show. I said, I'll take off days if you share my time. And they looked at me and said, is this guy for real? Like, he's like all these other actors are fighting to get and he's helping other people and taking off. They like, this guy's real. He's really doing this. So, not for a feather in my cap, just like, sharing the goodwill. I was moved by the Spirit. It was a good time for me and God in my life. So when you feel that movement of that Spirit, it's easy to be good. It's easy to extend the hand of peace and say, how can I help? Because you're feeling good inside. You're in a good place. No matter what's going on around you, you're not fearing anything. You're not in despair. You're in the mighty hand and the mighty grace of God holding you through every difficulty and challenge. And it's been like that for me in the acting. And then, needless to say, I had some encounters that you see, like these Weinstein. It doesn't just happen to women. It happens to guys. One of the casting agents, hit on me to, get sexual. I said, no, there'll be none of that. Do you understand? I grew up here in the city. I grew up in a very tough neighborhood. That's unacceptable. You feel me? I told him. He said, come on, guys like that. Yeah, we're girls, not guys. I said, so after that, they would call up for me at the studio. Where's Darren? Mm-hmm. Darren's like one of our guys. Where is he? Oh, he's on another job. See how dirty? It was play for pay. But they would call me home. And then later, I got picked to go to the SAG Awards, not to win an award, but I was fighting them, too, for equal protection for actors because it's our show. We vote for the other actors. And they pick handfuls because they make it more political and invite friends. When we're doing it, we should be there. It's a member show. Needless to say, we get picked. I go down. Who's there? Ted Kotchoff. He's looking at me. They let me bring a chaperone. They gave me a table. They said, this is the advocate. This guy fights for the disabled. We don't want him walking up any stairs. They give me a big table. There was 49 on the floor, on the award floor. I did notice one wheelchair there. There was one big table. I felt a little embarrassed. They put 3 people, me, my wife, and my chaperone allowed, and 49A. And while I'm walking around looking, I'm like in awe, like, wow, I'm at the awards show. Wow, this is pretty cool, Ted Kotchoff is the executive producer, right, with Dick Wolf. He's looking at me, and my nephew says to me, hey, Uncle, that guy is staring at you. What guy? I said, oh, Ted. I said, oh, shit, that's Ted. He says, I was waiting for you to come over. And we're such good friends. He said, where have you been? We were trying to get you. Why don't you just come by? He says, I heard a little controversy that, they made up stories and everything, Chauncey. Unbelievable. I said, aggravated harassment. Cops came. I went in and out because I was doing other work with Rudy Giuliani. And he said, and that was it. So, but I worked a little more. Now I'm going to work down here a little bit in Florida because they transferred the union. So I did get a few calls. Now you're older. They're looking for different things. So I put it out there, and they wanted to call me for a Hallmark thing. So I said, I'll do it. And get it, it was a theme. I was a grandfather, and it's a Hallmark thing to sell a Star Wars thing. So we don't know if I got it yet, but I said, Star Wars? Oh, man, I grew up with the Star Wars. So that's that end of it. And then, needless to say, my other races for New York, I did run.
Oh, Darren, listen, you can talk a little bit about it, but I want to have you come on another podcast, and we'll talk about the politics. I mean, what you gave us today, the background, the beginning of your advocacy, what you've done in the acting. Well, of course, it took up most of the amount of time, so I don't want to shortchange the political narrative because there is a lot to talk about there.
Oh my God!
Your run,
such
Yeah. So what we'll do is I'm definitely going to have you back on next month, and we'll talk about,
sure.
You being involved in politics, and we'll talk about the political climate in our country, and then we can talk about your 2025 candidacy for public advocate, and if Don Jr. doesn't run for mayor, you're still considering possibly running for mayor in 2025.
Well, that's what they're talking about, because it's either going to be one of the brothers. It's going to be Don or Eric, and with President Trump going to be president. We know that either way, because real Republicans, real Americans, we're not looking to do anything but save our country, and so real Republicans get behind each other. It's not that Eric or Don is better than me, but when you look at this narrative and what they've done by making it play for pay to get these positions, they're well-suited and well-financed. I would have to raise a lot of money, and that could stop a good candidate in this instance, because public advocate, nobody understands that that's a very powerful seat, second to the mayor. So I would support Don or Eric, and that way we'd have a team going in. And with the new president, number 47, then we would have the support we need to repair New York. And then if they do it, if not, and then they push me up, then it'll get the push. But we have to clean up our politics first. We have to clean up both parties and get rid of separate the wheat from the chaff. And that way we get back to business as usual, and we preserve and protect the greatest city in the world that now is facing its greatest challenges.
Darren, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on today.
Anytime for you, Chauncey. Anytime, brother.
And I'm going to keep your wife in my prayers. I know it's a minor procedure, but we're gonna pray.
Thank you.
And I'm
thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, brother.
Everything comes out.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm so blessed to have you as my friend. Thank you for sharing a tremendous story of your advocacy and how you got involved. It is a testament of who you are, person, a New Yorker. But like you said, you learned by seeking help for yourself how to turn it around and pay it forward.
God put in my heart that I'm going to be that voice. I'm going to learn by example, and I'm going to have his help all through it from beginning to end. When it says that when God has got you there, you're in the palm of his hand. Nothing's going to harm you, not a thing. And he takes you right through. You go through the valley, So I'm blessed to be able to do it. And Chauncey, I always look at somebody, and I'm so blessed. We spoke. I had the open heart surgery 15 months ago.
Yes.
I had 6 weeks to live. 6 weeks to live. And my sister, I was on a prayer chain around the world. I said, Tia, I'm not worried. I told my wife. And the doctor, not only did I have the top guy in the country, by grace, not by, I didn't know him from a holy, Dr. Jose Navia, best surgeon in the country. And now we're good friends. We went to dinner at Rayos. We're good friends. And my cardiologist, it was his friend. And he's the chief of here in Florida. It was God all the way. Never be discouraged. Be in faith. Be in faith. I want the listeners to be in faith. God has not forsaken you or forgotten you. It may seem grim right now, but he's right there sitting with you, waiting for you to say, take it over. Take it over.
Amen.
I surrender. And
Amen.
that's all I can say.
Amen.
Amen,
Darren,
brother.
thank you. Thank you so much, again, for your love, your friendship, and your advocacy, helping disabled Americans all over the country. We thank you for your service, and we will have you back on next.
I look forward to it, Chauncey. Let's talk about the political climate. Let's bring in our new president and fix our country. That's where it is. We'll
Darren,
leave it at
thank
that.
you so much. Yes, thank you so much Chauncey. Again for coming on. And I'm praying that your wife's procedure tomorrow will come out well. Take care and God bless.
Thank you, Chauncey. God bless, brother.
You're welcome. All righty. You're listening to America First Patriot Podcast. Defending freedom and liberty is our motto. We put God first and politics second. We're proud and honored to have in the studio Darren Aquino, former congressional candidate, but his humble beginnings growing up in New York and around the boroughs, growing up disabled and having to endure those challenges, helped him to become an advocate for those with disabled challenges. He's here to help. Next up, this Wednesday, we're going to have Darlene Swaffer, who's running for Congress in Florida, in the studio. Her nickname is the Medicaid Lady. She owns her own insurance company. I'm excited to have her on. She's running again for Congress in Florida, and she needs our support. So we're going to have her on at 7 o'clock on this Wednesday. I want to thank all my listeners for tuning in. And if you get a chance, please follow us on Twitter at USA First Podcast or American First Patriot Podcast on Truth Social and also on Getter and Gab. Have a good evening, and thank you all for tuning in. God bless you all. Good night now.